Across America, from Chicago to countless towns, a new and unsettling reality is taking hold. Rising living costs, empty store shelves, and a growing sense of unease. What once seemed unimaginable, scarcity and instability, is now unfolding at the heart of American life, exposing deep vulnerabilities in a system long believed to be unshakable. In today's video, we explore a controversial topic with you. But first, please note, the content of this video is for analytical and educational purposes only and does not represent any political views or organizations. Let's approach everything with an objective and open mind. Causes of the crisis. The underlying cause of the current retail disruption in America stems from the aggressive import tariff policies championed by President Donald Trump. In private meetings, the CEOs of Walmart, Target, and Home Depot, some of the nation's largest and most influential retailers, directly warned Trump that his tariffs were inflicting serious damage on the intricate networks that keep goods moving across borders. Their message was clear. The tariffs are not merely a negotiation tactic. They are actively dismantling supply chains, triggering runaway price increases, and leaving store shelves distressingly empty. Walmart, in particular, serves as a striking case study of this collapse. Historically, about 80% of Walmart's inventory has been sourced from China, reflecting a broader reliance across the U.S. retail sector on affordable Chinese manufacturing. Initially, Walmart and similar companies attempted to absorb some of the tariff-related costs, hoping the trade tensions would be short-lived. However, as the dispute dragged on, inventories dwindled. Stockpiles that once acted as a cushion against external shocks have been exhausted. Worse yet, new purchase orders from China have been canceled or delayed indefinitely, severing a crucial supply artery. But the consequences go beyond empty shelves and higher price tags. What we are witnessing is the unraveling of a global logistics model that American consumers have come to expect as an unshakable norm. For decades, U.S. retailers optimized operations under a just-in-time philosophy, minimizing inventory costs by relying on fast, predictable supply lines. The tariff war disrupted that delicate balance overnight, exposing a stunning vulnerability. The very efficiency that made the system profitable also made it fragile. From my personal perspective, Trump's tariff policies directly shattered the global supply chain that America heavily depended on, especially with China. Walmart and other major corporations warned him, but were ignored. The just-in-time system, once a cost-saving advantage, became a fatal weakness. Shortages, soaring prices, and canceled orders. America ended up weakening its own commercial ecosystem. From a broader economic perspective, this rupture introduces ripple effects that stretch far beyond retail stores. When major retailers struggle to secure goods, manufacturers, logistics companies, port operators, and even agricultural suppliers feel the strain. The entire economic web begins to fray. Furthermore, small businesses, which lack the financial flexibility of corporate giants like Walmart, are often hit even harder, forced to pass costs directly onto consumers or risk closure altogether. Psychologically, the impact may be even more profound. The average American shopper, long accustomed to the abundance of choice and the stability of low prices, now faces an unfamiliar and unsettling reality. Scarcity, once thought to be a relic of wartime economies or distant developing nations, is becoming part of daily life in a country that built its modern identity on consumer abundance. This deterioration of trust is dangerous. In times of uncertainty, public sentiment can shift rapidly from anxiety to anger, amplifying political divisions and undermining social cohesion. Historically, economic hardship tied to policy missteps has often become fertile ground for populism, extremism, and political realignment. Dynamics already visible in the heightened polarization of American society. In my personal view, the biggest damage lies not in prices, but in the erosion of public trust. Americans, long accustomed to abundance, now face scarcity, fueling frustration, deepening political divides, and feeding extremist movements. This instability will likely persist and worsen over time. In my view, the lesson here is stark but necessary. Trade policy cannot be wielded like a hammer without risking unintended domestic consequences. Tariffs are not surgical instruments. They are blunt tools that can inflict collateral damage on precisely those citizens they are ostensibly meant to protect. Without comprehensive strategies to build alternative supply chains, develop domestic manufacturing, and phase transitions gradually, the U.S. risks trading one form of dependency for another, while sacrificing economic resilience in the process. Ultimately, the empty shelves Americans now see are more than a temporary inconvenience. They are a warning signal flashing brightly across the nation's economic landscape. A sign that structural over-reliance on fragile global systems, when combined with abrupt political shocks, can transform even the world's largest economy into one vulnerable to scarcity, instability, and public disillusionment. From my personal standpoint, the key lesson is clear. Tariffs are a blunt tool that must be paired with a strategy to build domestic production and diversify supply chains. Without this, America remains vulnerable. Today's empty shelves are a loud and urgent warning for the future. Immediate consequences. The shortages facing American consumers today extend far beyond Chinese manufactured goods. Mexico, historically one of the United States' most critical suppliers of fresh produce, is now scaling back its exports to the U.S., opting instead to redirect agricultural products toward Europe and Canada, where demand is robust and trade conditions are more favorable. This shift in trade dynamics has triggered an immediate and painful impact on American grocery stores and dining tables. Prices for tomatoes, vegetables, fruits, and other essential food items have skyrocketed. Products that were once taken for granted as cheap and abundant have become costly, and in some cases, harder to find altogether. Major retailers are already feeling the strain. Walmart, the nation's largest grocery seller, recently announced the closure of 4 of its stores in Chicago, citing persistent financial losses amounting to tens of millions of dollars annually. These closures are not isolated incidents. They reflect a deeper economic fault line emerging in urban centers, particularly in areas where residents already face food insecurity and economic hardship. From my perspective, this development underscores how interconnected and fragile the modern food supply chain truly is. It's not merely about missing items on the shelves. It's about the cascading vulnerabilities that arise when long-established trade flows are disrupted. For decades, Mexico has served as a dependable agricultural partner, supplying everything from tomatoes to avocados year-round. However, when political tensions, tariffs, and global market shifts incentivize Mexican producers to look elsewhere, the United States loses not just products, but economic leverage and predictability. Moreover, the surge in food prices has broad social consequences. For middle and lower-income households, which already allocate a larger portion of their budgets to basic necessities, higher grocery costs deepen financial strain. The closures of stores like Walmart in key neighborhoods worsen the so-called food desert phenomenon, areas where access to fresh, affordable food becomes increasingly limited. This leads to a vicious cycle: rising prices, reduced access, declining nutrition, and ultimately wider health disparities among the population. Strategically, what is happening highlights a critical failure in foresight. The assumption that essential goods would always flow smoothly across borders underestimated the growing competitiveness of the global marketplace. Nations like Mexico are not passive suppliers. They are active players seeking better terms and broader opportunities. When the U.S. alienates partners through protectionist policies without building resilient domestic alternatives, it creates openings for competitors, and Americans are now paying the price in their everyday lives. In the bigger picture, the current shortages and price surges serve as a stark reminder. Economic interdependence is not a weakness when managed wisely, it is a strategic advantage. Alienating trade partners without securing new sources or domestic capacity leaves the economy vulnerable to shocks that no amount of nationalist rhetoric can easily fix. Ultimately, the emptying shelves and shuttered stores symbolize more than supply chain issues. They represent a fraying economic and social fabric, warning that the costs of short-term political maneuvers can echo far longer and deeper than many policymakers anticipate. Have you ever imagined going grocery shopping and finding tomatoes priced like gold? Well, congratulations! You're officially living through history. Drop a comment and let us know how food prices are looking in your area so we can laugh or cry together. Broader impacts. The ripple effects of supply chain disruptions are not confined to grocery aisles. The cost of construction materials has also soared dramatically. The price hikes for essential inputs like steel and lumber have added an estimated $20,000 or more to the cost of building a new home. a staggering burden in an already challenging housing market. For prospective homeowners, this translates into significantly higher mortgage obligations, or for many, an impossible financial hurdle. It also intensifies the broader affordability crisis plaguing American cities and suburbs alike, where housing shortages were already pushing prices to unsustainable levels even before these supply shocks hit. Meanwhile, small businesses, the backbone of local economies, are bearing the brunt of this inflationary wave. Independent restaurants, corner stores, family-owned shops, and service providers, which typically operate on tight margins, are now grappling with runaway input costs they can neither fully absorb nor easily pass on to increasingly price-sensitive customers. As a result, many have been forced to make heartbreaking decisions, cutting staff, reducing operating hours, scaling back services, and in too many cases, closing their doors permanently. The closure of these small businesses is not merely an economic loss. It tears at the very social fabric of communities, erasing gathering spaces, local jobs, and cultural landmarks that larger corporate chains cannot easily replace. From a broader economic lens, this growing wave of small business closures risks accelerating a dangerous trend: the further consolidation of economic power into the hands of a few massive corporations. When local competitors are wiped out, market diversity shrinks, innovation slows, and consumers ultimately face fewer choices and higher prices, the very outcomes free market systems are designed to prevent. In my view, the situation also highlights a critical imbalance in the resilience of America's economic architecture. While large corporations often have the capital reserves and bargaining power to weather volatility, small businesses are left dangerously exposed, treated as collateral damage in broader policy battles over trade, tariffs, and supply chain realignment. The steep rise in construction costs and the collapse of small businesses are therefore not isolated issues. They are twin symptoms of a deeper structural vulnerability, an economy optimized for efficiency but ill-prepared for sustained external shocks. Without deliberate efforts to rebuild resilience, through diversified supply chains, targeted financial support for small enterprises, and smarter, more adaptive trade policies, these vulnerabilities will continue to widen, deepening economic inequality and eroding the foundations of American prosperity. Ultimately, the combined pressures on housing and small businesses serve as a stark warning. An economy that cannot protect its builders, creators, and entrepreneurs from systemic shocks risks not just slower growth, but a profound weakening of the social trust and economic dynamism that underpin its long-term strength. Public response and the future. Public anger in the United States is reaching a boiling point as citizens demand accountability from their government over the escalating shortages and economic instability. The frustration is not just about higher prices or empty shelves, it is about a profound sense of betrayal, a feeling that policymakers underestimated the risks and are now scrambling without a clear solution. In response to mounting pressure, President Donald Trump publicly asserted that negotiations with China were underway to ease tariffs and restore some stability to trade flows. However, Beijing swiftly and unequivocally rejected these claims, signaling that no meaningful progress was being made behind closed doors. In fact, Chinese officials have emphasized their commitment to diversifying their export markets, reducing reliance on the U.S. and strengthening ties with Europe, Southeast Asia, and other emerging regions. This strategic pivot by China has had immediate and painful consequences for American consumers. Goods that once flowed steadily from Chinese factories into American households are now being rerouted to more welcoming markets abroad. As a result, the threat of prolonged shortages in the U.S. is growing more severe with each passing month. From my perspective, this unfolding scenario highlights a critical miscalculation: the assumption that the United States could unilaterally impose economic pressure without facing lasting retaliation. Global trade dynamics have shifted dramatically in recent years, with many countries building alternative alliances and supply routes precisely to reduce their vulnerability to U.S. economic leverage. In trying to strong-arm China without a multi-layered global strategy, the U.S. finds itself increasingly isolated, watching essential goods slip away to competing nations. Moreover, the gap between political promises and economic realities is widening dangerously. As American leaders insist that relief is just around the corner, ordinary citizens are confronting a very different truth at their local supermarkets, hardware stores, and gas stations. The erosion of trust between the public and their institutions, fueled by repeated unmet assurances, may ultimately prove even more damaging than the immediate economic hardships. At its core, the growing scarcity problem is not simply about supply chains or tariffs. It is about the risks of overconfidence in a rapidly multipolar world. Trade wars are not won with slogans or short-term bluster. They require careful planning, international coalition building, and an honest recognition that economic interdependence has fundamentally reshaped global power dynamics. In the absence of such a strategy, the U.S. now faces a painful paradox. Even as leaders talk tough on protecting American interests, the reality on the ground reveals an economy increasingly vulnerable to external shifts beyond its control. The warning signs are everywhere. And unless policymakers pivot swiftly with a more pragmatic, globally aware approach, the hardships facing American families could deepen into a prolonged and avoidable crisis. Workforce and labor market disruptions. An often overlooked yet increasingly undeniable fallout from America's ongoing supply chain disruptions and soaring living costs is the mounting instability within the labor market, particularly among low and mid-skilled workers. As consumer prices climb relentlessly and wages lag behind, the grim reality of working poverty is no longer a marginal issue. It is becoming alarmingly mainstream, even within the world's largest economy. The survival strategies being adopted by workers reveal the depth of this crisis. Many are now clocking in excessive overtime hours, juggling multiple jobs, or even uprooting their lives to relocate to rural areas where living expenses are marginally lower. This internal migration is not without consequence. It is generating new labor imbalances between urban and rural regions, complicating workforce planning for businesses already grappling with unpredictable market conditions. Critical sectors such as hospitality, retail, and construction, all of which traditionally rely on low-wage labor, are bearing the brunt of these changes, suffering from acute staffing shortages. Meanwhile, industries that demand more specialized skills are also feeling the pressure, as financial hardships make it increasingly difficult for individuals to pursue the training and education needed to fill these roles. The result is a dual crisis, a scarcity of both entry-level and highly skilled labor, putting the entire employment ecosystem under strain. In my view, this unfolding scenario highlights a dangerous feedback loop. Without bold and deliberate interventions, such as raising the minimum wage, investing in workforce development programs, and improving workplace standards, the U.S. faces the risk of deepening its economic woes. Labor shortages will inevitably drive up operational costs, forcing companies to raise prices even further, thereby accelerating the inflationary pressures already squeezing American households. Left unaddressed, this cycle could entrench a new norm, where economic opportunity and security become even more elusive for the average worker, fundamentally reshaping the nation's socioeconomic fabric. Technology sector and high-tech manufacturing, a silent struggle unfolds. Although much of the public's attention remains fixed on shortages of everyday goods, a quieter but equally alarming crisis is rippling through America's technology sector. Hidden from the average consumer's view, disruptions in the supply of critical electronics components, semiconductors, and advanced manufacturing tools, all intricately tied to international supply chains, are beginning to choke innovation and production in the heart of American high-tech industries. Leading tech companies, ranging from electronics giants to electric vehicle pioneers and dynamic tech startups, are grappling with a perfect storm, an acute scarcity of vital inputs, surging manufacturing costs, and the forced postponement of new product releases. These setbacks do not merely impact quarterly earnings, they threaten the very foundation of America's long-term technological dominance. Meanwhile, nations such as China, South Korea, and Germany are seizing the moment, pouring massive investments into achieving technological independence and strengthening their domestic innovation ecosystems. In my perspective, this situation marks a pivotal strategic inflection point. Without a bold and coordinated effort to re-engineer its supply networks, such as scaling up domestic semiconductor fabrication, incentivizing local production of essential tech components, and deepening alliances with trusted global partners. The U.S. risks ceding ground in industries that will define the future global economy. Importantly, this is not just about economics or market share. It cuts to the core of national security. In a world increasingly shaped by technological prowess and geopolitical rivalry, losing the edge in critical tech sectors would severely constrain America's influence and resilience on the global stage. The urgency of the moment cannot be overstated. The choices made today will determine whether America remains a leader in technological innovation or becomes dependent on the very rivals it now seeks to outpace. The United States now finds itself on the brink of an economic crisis, a crisis largely fueled by its own miscalculated tariff decisions. The question is no longer whether the impact is real. It's here, affecting everyday lives. The real question is, how will America find its way out of this mess? We want to hear your thoughts. What do you think the solution should be? Drop your opinion in the comments below and join the conversation.